Good afternoon, all, and welcome. So my name is Peter Umune, and I am the Senior Environmental Specialist. I work for the Global Environment Facility at the GEF, where I lead agriculture and food system programs. So our session will focus on how land restoration heal the planet. Very important. We heard this morning, many, especially in the opening, we are now trying to move toward designing some solutions moving forward to address this planetary crisis that we are facing in this planet. But the session will take stock of progress that have been made toward restoration, but also what are the key actions that need to be taken moving forward as we embrace this restoration and regeneration, especially in this decade of ecosystem restoration. The session will also examine a bit the restoration in the angle of food systems, because as you know, how the use of land for food production needs to change between now and the 2030 and beyond. And we know the way we produce our food, the way we consume our food, the way we commercialize our food is not really sustainable. So we need to think a little bit more about that. And we will be hearing from our speakers on that. But before I bring the speaker, let me thank the Follow team, because they are very much organizing this and the amazing work that they've been doing in really trying to promote sustainable and integrated landscape and efficient value chain, value and supply chain. And also the GLF is part of the Follow team, so I want to give them a very kudos for the amazing work that they are doing. So, but also the Follow has a pavilion, so anytime you can ask him any questions there as well. So, before I pass it to the speakers, I think the technology is working on the QR code that will be on the screen, and there will be a Q&A session towards the end. So I don't know if you can put the QR on the screen so that people can see. Fantastic, thank you. So you can have your questions, and people who are following us online as well, they can have their questions, and then we can collect those questions towards the end. So joining me today, I have two experienced people. One is online, and the second one is actually with us. So allow me to introduce first the first one. Her name is Mary Perpetua Kwakui, who is online, and I will just ask Mary to unmute herself and give us a quick presentation about yourself. Mary.
Yeah, fantastic. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. As you rightly said, my name is Mary Perpetua Kwakui, and then I'm the Executive Director of Ogoshin Global Vision. It's an environmental, community-led, non-governmental organization working with TerraFund for AFR 100 to do afforestation projects in Ghana, particularly in the western region of Ghana, building capacities of women and youth in our project activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for joining us. Second speaker is Duncan. Duncan, just take it.
Thank you, Peter, and good afternoon to you all. My name is Duncan Okoa. I work with the World Resources Institute, or WRI, based in Nairobi. I am the Landscape Policy Accelerator Associate for Africa, which is a program looking to support public policymakers to design policies and incentives that support integrated forest and landscape restoration. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, because this is very much a conversation, I will just sit, and then let's have this conversation quite easily. Okay? Good. Yeah. So, thank you very much for joining us. And have quite, I mean, this agenda is a bit packed, and we only have 45 minutes. But, you know, we will be talking a little bit about restoration, and then we will look into the food system as well. So let's start first with restoration. I know, some data are showing that's about 2 billion hectares of agricultural land, pasture, forest, and woodland are degraded globally. And this has quite a negative impact on food system, ecosystem services, and habitat for wildlife. Well, we know we have restoration underway in many places. However, that degradation continues to happen. So tell us a little bit, different restoration approaches that are being considered and implemented that are really better combined to achieve multiple benefits, including environmental benefit, while also ensuring revenues for smallholder local communities. And I want you to talk a little bit about what you just explained when you were doing your introduction in terms of the policy accelerator, because that is also something that contributes a lot to reforestation. So over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. I think I'll start from the point you mentioned that restoration approaches that are better combined, because I think the very concept of forest and landscape restoration in itself actually implies combined approaches. For effective forest and landscape restoration to happen, we are actually one of the key principles is a focus on landscapes, not just on individual project sites. So for effective restoration, we are looking at balancing a mosaic of interrelated land uses that are within one landscape. So we are talking about, for instance, protected forest areas, riparian zones, agroforestry systems, farmlands, maybe crop plantations, all within the same landscape. So for you to achieve effective restoration, you probably need to combine at least two or more approaches, depending on the landscape itself. So yes, I think most of our regions will actually require a combination of approaches. So if you look at Africa, for instance, which is simply because this is where we are today, for most of the subtropical regions, which I think is much of sub-Saharan Africa, you can probably combine agroforestry systems with sustainable agricultural practices. We are talking about, of course, you mentioned regenerative agriculture, organic farming, or integrating horticulture and woody plants within coffee or tea plantations, so that as you increase the tree cover and stabilize the soil and do good for the climate, you are also providing income, food, energy needs for the smallholder farmers and the people who live in these landscapes. Another example would be if you consider maybe the more arid and semi-arid regions where maybe pastoralism is the dominant practice. You can also consider combining silvopasture, which is basically including trees within pastoral lands, and combining that with maybe drought-resistant crops, and also maybe agroforestry again, so that you are again restoring the land, but also providing sustainable income for the people who live there. Much of our landscapes, again, are we have quite a bit of degraded watersheds. So we can also consider approaches that restore watersheds and combining that with maybe sustainable commercial plantations in sustainable rotations, and again, maybe sustainable agriculture, so that as you restore the riparians, you are improving the water quality, improving the aquatic biodiversity in these places. But again, through sale of timber, through sale of the crops, our farmers and smallholders can also, sustain their livelihoods. And there are several other combinations that you can consider, and this will really depend on which landscapes you're working on. But at least a combination of 2 or more sets of different restoration practices, I think would be the best way to do. And linking to the policy accelerator work, I think to achieve this, there's this need to, support this through targeted policies and incentive programs that target or encourage the smallholder farmers, stakeholders, even private sectors to make that shift. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with our program, the Landscape Policy Accelerator, which is basically a peer-to-peer capacity building and mentorship program for public officials looking to improve the design or implementation of policies around landscape restoration. So that's how I would respond to.
Fantastic. I like what you said in terms of the combination of approaches. I think when you do agroforestry, when you do silvopastoralism, when you look into riparian watershed, and if restoration can provide multiple benefits, including economic benefit for smallholders, that becomes very interesting, right? So, and the work that you are doing under the Policy Accelerator is actually providing that incentives for smallholder to be able to really embrace restoration. Thank you very much, Deacon. Let me now turn to Mary, who's online. I know, Mary, you work a lot with smallholders and people. So you just said, rightly said, you work with women, you work with youth. In this work of landscape restoration, it's very important to have many stakeholders involved, and especially smallholders. And you are working with them quite strongly. So the question that I have to you is, why is it so important to engage women and the youth in restoration activities? And you are the one working on the ground and working with grassroots. Tell us a little bit about your experience on this and tell us why is it so important. Over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Peter, for this question. As we are all aware, agriculture is the most important employment sector for women in Africa. And Ghana is not excluded where I work. In this era of climate change, with its negative consequences of drought and erratic rainfall, women as agricultural workers and primary procurers work harder to secure income and resources for their families. Women also, as a group mostly affected by climate change, have a better indigenous knowledge and understanding of what needs to be done to adapt to these changing environmental conditions, to protect the environment, and come up with practical solutions to problems introduced by climate change. They are key gatherers and suppliers of natural resources, and therefore they rely on them for their sustenance and livelihoods. Through our work with TerraFarm for AFR 100 in Ghana restoration activities, we are therefore better able to engage these women in decision-making by combining their valuable indigenous knowledge they have with science-based solutions to come up with sustainable practice for long-lasting climate action to relieve their plight. Jobs are created during the value chain for women to earn money and then increase their household by this restoration. It also ensures food security through cocoa agroforestry, and then they make independent economic decisions for themselves. There's also transfer of restoration skills like establishing community nurseries, which they sell to government and other NGOs who are also into reforestation program. On the other hand, the youth are the future generations we all know, and they will be the one to be disproportionately suffer the consequences of current interactions and then the harmful activity that is happening to Mother Earth now. They have the highest stake in the fight against environmental threats, and it is on this background that Goshen Global Vision have engaged them to be part of the solution. Having in mind that in this technological era, they can develop expertise and contribute towards a better understanding of the value of natural resource, carbon accounting, and degradation measurements, halting habitat loss and fragmentation, reconciling conservation goals, having better water quality and quantity, and growing sustainable livelihoods. These youth, as we engage them, they must be better engaged in adaptation efforts at the community and national levels to learn multiple adaptation methods, and this is going to contribute to reducing the ecological rifts. The World Economic Forum said, restoration should not only be measured by the number of trees and forests grown, but by how many young people have been able to build successful profession, organizations, and livelihoods around ecosystem restoration. During our restoration activities, they have also have technological skills transfer in the use of GPS for drawing polygons, flying of drones for monitoring, which will help the youth to apply for jobs in formal sectors while earning money and developing their passion to come out with applications that will make restoration even more fun and less laborious. In our project with TerraFarm for AFR 100 in Ghana, there is an intentional effort of engaging 78% youth, and then 82% women are in our restoration activities. Me, myself, being a woman, is also impacting so much in women getting involved in restoration. And it has led to success stories of women who have acquired restoration skills and have become economically empowered through our restoration activities. And we have developed youth ambassadors influencing change in their schools, communities, and peer group cycles. From what has been said so far, it is imperative, and we all agree to the fact that engaging women and youth as agents of change is pivotal in our efforts to healing the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that conclusion is very telling. I guess we heard from Mary really trying to emphasize the role of women, their knowledge, and we need to include them in decision making. And also they are the one that are taking care of the families. So if they are empowered and they become independent, then we are likely to resolve this problem. But also the youth, I think the future generation, they are very smart. They know technology quite a lot. You know, so right now they can tell you, they can do a tweet, and it's less than a sentence, if you can say that, just to put it in that way, and they will have 1 million people following it. So we need to leverage the knowledge of youth, especially and women, but also youth in terms of what they know and how they will be responsible for future generations. So thank you very much. And since you really talked about agriculture already, and food system as we speak about restoration, same way as you, Deacon. I think let's now transition a bit to, we heard a little bit about restoration, but let's also talk a little bit about food system, because I believe what we really want to do is to address the challenges of sustainable food production, right? Because we need to move toward extractive methods to more regenerative agricultural practices. And to you, Deacon, what are the key actions for food system transformation that you may know? You know, I mean, in your knowledge. So we heard Carol Manuel this morning, my boss, talking a little bit about repurposing agricultural subsidies, talking a bit about many other actions to be taken. I just want you to elaborate a little bit about that, but also if you can touch a little bit the role of policy change, the role of finance, but maybe certification as well in that. So over to you, Deacon.
Yes, thank you,
That
Peter.
sounds quite a lot of questions, but yeah.
Yes, I was just going to mention that, and thank you for mentioning that, the ones I may know, because I don't know if this is working. I think it's working. Yeah, because I'm not the food expert here. But I think especially in Africa, again, food systems are really intricately linked to sustainable landscapes. So I'll start by saying that effectively transforming our food systems will actually start from revitalizing our landscape. So restoration will still continue to play a very important role in transforming our food systems. But away from restoration, I think adopting and embracing sustainable agricultural practices is important. We need to embrace, practices that, feed us, but also don't have so much negative impacts on the land itself and the environment. Practices like regenerative agriculture have been mentioned, agroforestry itself, organic farming. So all these practices that really don't leave a very big impact on the environment. I think the more we embrace them, the more we'll do good for our food systems. But connected to that, I think the need to embrace innovation and technology, I think will also be very important. So whether it's new machines or new production technologies or new products, or just investing in digital monitoring of our food systems, or in up-to-date or state-of-the-art data of, just using data-led analysis of our food systems. I think those will be very important. And talking of technology, issues of like genetically modified foods have really gained a very hot debate in the recent past. So I think we need to have a very honest debate about such kind of technologies rather than, this blanket condemnation or blanket approval of these systems. So, yeah, and the other thing is, I think we also need to embrace and adopt some of these indigenous crops and underutilized crops, just to increase the diversity of our diets, but also because these crops are also mostly climate and drought resistant. Where I grew up as a kid, we used to do a lot of, we used to have bumper harvest of sorghum, finger millets, cassava. That doesn't happen anymore. The farmers who produce them, it's not being produced at scale, and it's not being widely supported by private sector, by government. So we need to invest more on that. The other important thing I think would be around food loss, especially in Africa. Again, I learned just the other day in another workshop that we lose as much as 40% of the food we produce. So we really need to embrace practices that reduce food loss and waste, whether it's in our farms during production or on our roads and factories during processing, or even on our dinner tables. So we need to embrace technologies that help us to at least consume all the foods, or as much as possible of the foods we produce. And again, these actions will be made more effective if we, adopt new policies, new incentives that again, support people to make this shift towards these actions. Linking again to financing, I think financing is very important for our food systems, and we probably need to have initiatives that attract both public and private investments in food production. So whether it's through access to credits for farmers, initiatives around sustaining the value chains for our farmers, or just all these incentives that then enable farmers to invest in sustainable food production. And lastly, on certifications, again, I think I'll just say certifications will play a very key role, whether it's about forestry certifications or certifications around organic farming, because what they'll do is help the farmers to embrace sustainable practices, but also help them to fetch better prices for the products that they produce by, through the global market connections that can be catalyzed by these certification schemes.
Fantastic, thank you. I think you cover quite a lot of ground there. You talk about restoration will play a key role. You talk about innovation and technology. You talk about indigenous crops and how we diversify our diet. You talk a little bit about food loss, which is a very big concern right now. It's not just Africa, I think all over the world. There was a key study from the UK by the WWF that says about maybe 70%, is lost on that. There is policy and also innovative finance. So those are very key elements to transform our food system. Let me talk to Mary, because we also have so many questions online. So before I take those questions, Mary, I think you have quite a lot to share on this discussion, and you work with people, and you promote restoration with women, with youth. This also comes to our food system. So, as a citizen, I think when you go and talk to people, you try to tell them about, how we behave in terms of protecting the environment while producing our food. Could you tell a little bit about, what the message you give to people with regards to how the food is produced, what is their responsibilities, but also if you can also touch a little bit about finance, subsidies, or certification, if you know of. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. So in our movement, it is always said that food citizenship is a movement. So as a movement, in our quest, as we work in our communities with women, we are able to create an awareness to let them know that the food that we eat is not just for eating, but we are looking at the nutritional aspect and then the health aspect that comes with it. And therefore, the women and ourselves and all other people, we have a role and the power to make a positive change in our food system, in where we find ourselves. So in our conversation, we're able to let the citizens know that as consumers, our responsibility and as producers should all be geared towards transforming our food system to address urgent challenges such as unhealthy diet, malnutrition and undernutrition, insufficient reduction of greenhouse gases emission. A crucial role in our quest for this transformation, for example, should be a transition towards healthy and plant-based diets, which brings a host of environmental benefits, including reduced strain on land and water resources, as well as less pollution. In all this, farmers are also to know that another role of a food citizenship should aim at being resilient, persistent, even if the people are not getting it. If the technologies are not working, we need to be persistent. We need to have inclusiveness, trusting and being hopeful that in the future, this is going to succeed. And also, on the other hand, we fire up at injustice in our food chains and systems. Looking that in the future, we will see a lot of people who can't be able to eat well or participate in their community should be of a much concern to us. I will try to tackle a little on the subsidy. Research have shown that to feed the world and solve climate change, the world needs to produce 50% more food in 2050 compared to 2010. Whilst reducing greenhouse gas emission by 2/3. These subsidies provide improvements in farmers' income through increased productivity, and then it secures them greater market access to strengthen their value chain and at times helping them to provide a niche for themselves. An important role which enables our smallholder farmers to produce crop in which they enjoy comparative advantage and to build commodity value chains around them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing that perspective of healthy diet, transition to plant-based, but also resilient. Let's now look into some of the questions that are coming online. And I have quite a lot of them for you guys. So just get ready to tackle a few of them. The first one is, how do you see community-based approach in restoration? That's one, just please note, I will read a few of them. Let's take a batch. And then what are the main drivers for smallholder farmers to adopt and embrace landscape restoration practices beyond project interventions? And the third one, and I'll stop there for you to address them. How do you see community-based approach in restoration? I think this is pretty much the first one as well. Let's take the fourth one. Can you tell a bit more about the farmer's income increasing through landscape restoration? So building restoration as a financial or economic opportunities. So who wants to start? And then I will take the other batch of questions. So quickly, 1 minute, 2 minutes, I think we're running a bit out of time, but I will let you start. I don't know, Mary, do you want to start with some of these questions?
I'll start with the first question, asking how farmers are able to increase their livelihood through restoration. Yeah, so with that, during the restoration value chain, we engage these farmers in all the acts of the restoration. If you are doing nurseries, if we are doing agroforestry, we try to plant fruit trees that are able to mature within 3 months or 4 months. So during the restoration, they are able to get these fruit trees, which they use to increase their nutrients as well as sell to other community members to increase their livelihoods. And also these trees that we plant in cocoa agroforestry, at the long run, is going to be for the farmers' benefits. So it's their assets, and they can use it as collateral to collect loans. And then they have the certificate to these trees where they are able to harvest within 15 to 20 years. And this monies all go to the farmers. Thank you.
Fantastic. Duncan, I want you to address this question about the main driver for small farmers to adopt and embrace restoration practices beyond even the project interventions. That's a very important question, if you can tackle that quickly.
Okay. I think the way I would see it is, for a very long time, restoration has been conservation driven, and many times these approaches have left out the livelihood needs of local communities. So I think part of addressing that shift is to embrace more productive oriented restoration models that not only focus on restoring landscapes, but also on the needs of local communities. So part of this would be initiatives that connect landscapes to markets, so that restoration is actually geared towards increasing the farmers' income. Part of the reason why we see communities, smallholder farmers, not embracing restoration is it's because it's expensive from them on the short term. So if they see they can actually increase their livelihoods, increase their income through the practices that they do, when they embrace technologies, and these are supported by private sector and public bodies, technologies that make restoration to be productive, to be beneficial to the farmers in the short term, whether it's about increasing their food production, increasing their income, listening to their needs of energy, then I think local communities and smallholder farmers will be able to embrace more, this restoration, rather than just seeing it as a government-driven agenda for conservation.
Fantastic. So it has to make economic sense. That's very good. There is another question. I think I will take a couple of questions that are coming now. One being, how do we ensure that we do not introduce invasive plant species in our effort to restore degraded lands? That's a very important question. And the second one is, well, this has been actually answers. So yes, the second question is basically, are you supporting multi-stakeholder platforms at landscape level to foster better coordination of intervention? So the coordination aspect and whether you support multi-stakeholder platforms. I think you can take that first before we go to Mary quickly. So quickly,
Okay.
1 minute.
I think for multi-stakeholder platforms, the answer is yes. It's really something that we are really focusing on, and that is with the understanding that landscape restoration is actually a multi-stakeholder process involving, several institutions, stakeholders, partners, and not one institution or organization or individual can achieve it alone. So multi-stakeholder platforms are important. And at WRI, it's actually something we are really focusing on to strengthen them in the different landscapes that we work in.
Cool, Mary, can you tackle a couple of these questions?
Okay, so I think I'll tackle how do we ensure we don't introduce invasive species in our restoration work? As we do our restoration, we also work with the scientists in every restoration activity that is done, be it cocoa agroforestry, maize agroforestry, or wherever agroforestry that is being done. Most of the time, we work with the scientists and the researchers who are able to come out with trees, into brackets, we call them desirable trees. So right from doing the restoration, we know the desirable trees that needs to be planted in the time of restoration activities that we are doing. So this is the way to ensure that invasive species are not planted in our restoration activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we are done with online questions. We still have about 5 minutes. Let me really turn to the audience. I think people might have some questions. I don't want to dismiss you and you are participating. So please raise your hand. We want to take a couple questions, 1 or 2, 3 questions, and then we wrap up. I think it's time for lunch. So who wants to go first? Don't be shy.
I'm Peter Minang. I work for C4ICRAF as the Director of Africa. Thanks for the presentations and the lively discussion. Just one quick point that I wanted to double check with both panelists is on what is the experience on deployment of incentives for transforming landscapes? Because in the work that we do, this comes up repeatedly as probably challenge number 1, whether they are policy incentives, financial incentives, or indeed behavioral incentives, which is something that we haven't been focusing on enough in terms of the behavioral parts. Just your experiences. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. Another question, maybe we take one more. There is a gentleman outside.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mordecai Ogada. My question is about this continuous talk and move towards what we call plant-based diets as an environmental, a move to preserve environment. This is the increasing assault on pastoralists and those who live in arid areas, because they are being painted as being harmful to the environment because of their diet. And these blanket things cannot be put across everyone else. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the controversy around plant-based and also incentives to transform landscapes. So quickly, we still have 2 minutes, but I want you to take 30 seconds and Mary 30 seconds before we wrap up.
Thank you. I'll take the question around deploying incentives. I think it's very important. It has been a very important theme throughout the yesterday and today. And what I would say is that incentives will definitely play a very important role towards moving the shift to sustainable landscapes and food systems. And I think it's a project initiative that we are deploying in Africa, just through our Policy Accelerator program. We are really trying not to focus on higher level policies and regulations, but really to sort of bridge the gap between the policies that are already there and their implementation, how these policies reach the smallholder farmer. And we've realized that it's through this incentive. So it's something that we are really trying to push through, trying to help public policy makers, farmers to identify what are the incentives they want and how can we use guidelines, regulations, incentive mechanisms to make them actualize their goals on the ground. And just one last thing, we've also realized that there are a lot of incentives just from our rapid policy stock take in a few countries in Africa. There are a lot of incentives that are already in place in paper, but they're not being implemented effectively. So that is also something we are trying to focus on to see what are the things standing on the way of effective implementation of these policies that are already there, and how can we support, and not just us, how can everyone work together to make these incentives to reach their goals.
Okay, Mary, quickly, if you have a 30-second.
Okay, so declaring incentive is very, very imperative and important. Our farmers and then the community members destroy the trees and then they kill the wildlife, not because they don't know the importance of these ecosystem, but because of livelihoods. So if you're able to give them incentives, then this is going to let them stay away from the trees that we are planted and then the ecosystem restoration that we are doing. So they'll be able to meet their basic needs and they will leave the trees and the ecosystem to enjoy the habitat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is, I hope you enjoyed the session. Let me just summarize a couple of points that I hear from the speakers. Well, I think what we hear is that we really need to achieve healthy and resilient ecosystem through restoration, but also to secure livelihood. But to do that, I think speakers have been talking about different solutions. So one is potentially policy and the planning, and how do we effectively implement those policies. The second thing that I heard is innovation and planning, and this talks about technological innovation and how we leverage that with our youth being at the center of that. Build a movement where we don't leave people behind, focus on smallholders, youth and women, but also innovative finance. And build the business case around restoration has been mentioned, but the role of science is very important. And on the food system, I think we need to take an integrated approach across the whole value chain. I think that's the way we can achieve this and have reduce environmental degradation and the negative externalities around our food system. So with that, I want to thank you all, and thank you, Duncan and Mary, for sharing all your insights and the experiences. And I give back to you guys for your lunchtime. So thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause.